Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm William Cooley. I'm the City of Vancouver's Community Engagement Manager, and I'd like to introduce Coco. Coco, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, hi, I'm Coco. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the neighborhood programs coordinator with the City of Vancouver.
Fantastic. And we are both here tonight from the city's Office of Neighborhoods. And we're really excited to be talking to you about the Community and Neighborhood Grants Program. This is a project that's been a long time coming and one that some of you may have participated in an earlier version of. I think it's been since 2009 that the city has been able to offer a program. So we're very excited to bring it back this year. And we have $200,000 to give away. So we need all of your help doing that. We welcome your great ideas and projects. One thing, as Coco mentioned earlier for tonight's meeting, please feel free to share your questions, comments you have in the chat. If there's a question that's really burning and you want to make sure we ask it, we can try to ask it as we go through tonight's presentation. We designed this presentation, though, to be very brief. It's going to cover some really basic information that we want any applicant or any interested group to know. And then we'll have lots of time for your questions. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump in here. Part of what we'll be talking about tonight is just an overview of the grant program. So we'll be talking about the types of organizations and projects that are eligible for grants. We'll talk a little bit about how projects are going to be evaluated, so what the application process looks like. We'll talk a little bit about reporting. It's hopefully going to be a very streamlined process and an easy thing, but something that we want every grant recipient to go through. And we'll also talk a little bit about the project timeline. This is a grant that's going to be operating on a rolling basis, which is wonderful. It's one of the things we heard from community members that was very important to them. So not just be sort of one deadline, and if you've missed it, you're not eligible. There'll be multiple times throughout the year that folks can apply, which is great, until funding runs out. We'll also talk a little bit about the application itself and some of the application questions. We'd love to hear sort of your different ideas and some of the different options that we're considering together as kind of a partnership. And we'll also talk about different supports that are available. So with that, we'll jump in here. So when it comes to eligibility for this project, we really wanted to set this as broad as possible. So if you're part of a group, a collaborative that's working to support community building, either within the city of Vancouver or within the city's urban growth area, you are eligible. Eligible groups include the ones you see here on the screen, so community-based organizations, nonprofits, neighborhood associations, as well as any manner of clubs. So we had some questions earlier about, does that include informal organizations? Yes, it does. Does it include school-based or student clubs? Those are all eligible as well, things like PTO or PTA or PTSA groups. If your organization is informal and does not have kind of a formal leadership structure, but you meet, you collaborate with one another, you work on projects, you are eligible, and we're happy to work with you. Some of the questions we've also received about groups that are ineligible would be things like businesses. So for-profit enterprises are not eligible. Government agencies are not eligible. So that would include like a school, for example, or a special district. They are not eligible, but they may have an organization that is affiliated with them that is eligible. So that's something to keep in mind. And then in terms of eligible activities, we want to be mindful that this needs to be something that's free and open to the public. So the projects that you engage in cannot be ones that people have to pay to participate in. They can't be political in nature, and they can't be activities involving fundraising. So we're currently taking applications. The application window is now open. And when we think about how applications be evaluated, we've received some questions about that as well. So we wanted to sort of walk through what applications should include. Applications should, more than anything else, address a community need. If your project is addressing a need that isn't being met by another organization or by another group, if it's situated in a part of the city that doesn't currently receive a service or a program that's similar, it would meet this criteria of addressing a community need. It also needs to align with city council priorities. So those three priorities are equity, public safety, or climate action, and strategic plan focus areas. So those are listed here on the right-hand side. They're quite diverse, and they include any manner of basically project category you can probably think of. But the more that they support, the more your score your project will get. So if you think about kind of a points-based system, if you're able to align it to a city council priority, let's say public safety, and it also has to do with vibrant and distinct neighborhoods, that would be a higher scoring project than one that's not able to align easily. We're also going to be evaluating projects based on the extent that they involve the community, that they allow for more equitable participation, and that they're inclusive of the broader community. So when we think about that, that would look like partnerships with other organizations, bringing in volunteers, or finding ways to serve parts of the city that maybe haven't been as historically engaged or involved. And then lastly, we're looking at positive impact on the community. So every project should be able to kind of explain and share what they imagine that their project will do. It might bring people together, it might build something, or it might create something else. And Coco, am I seeing a question in the chat?
No, that was me sharing about the strategic plan.
Thank you. Thank you all for bearing with me tonight. I'm working on one monitor, so it'll be a little bit of a challenge there. But to Coco's sharing in the chat there, that's a link to our strategic plan focus areas and the strategic plan page. We of course invite you to read through the entire plan if you'd like to kind of understand some of the goals that the city's working toward. But when you think about your project, if you can align it with one of these focus areas, the ones that are listed here on the screen and descriptions are on that strategic plan page, it'll be a very helpful way to kind of identify what your project's working toward. And we would invite you, like in the free response portions, to share a little bit more about how you imagine it will help support those things. In terms of grant reporting, our goal is to make this as streamlined as easy as possible, while at the same time making sure that we're accountable for the way we're using public funds. We're very lucky to have this $200,000, and we're hopeful that the City Council will continue to support it in future years. And part of that for us is going to be able to show the impacts. So within 30 days of completing a project, recipients are required to create a report. And it really should focus on who you served, what outcomes were generated or impacts were generated as a result of the project, and then how your money was spent. Part of the application process we'll look at in a few minutes is going to ask for a preliminary budget, but we also would like a little bit of a final accounting to understand how money was spent. That will be different, of course, for every project, but the things you might include in your grant report would be things like photos or still images from a video of the event. It could be examples of things that have been created or produced as a result of the grant, or it could be testimonials and quotes from people who participated. So there's lots of ways you can build that in. We are not looking for you to write a long essay or to feel like you have to sort of have a perfect college level report. This is much less academic and much more designed to celebrate the great things you're going to be doing. And then with that, I turn over to Coco.
I would love to talk about our grant timeline. As you may have noticed, the applications are open right now in January. Our first awards will be going out in mid-March, and the application will remain open this entire time, and then we will have another round of awards in early June, and then again early August, and hopefully mid-October or until funding runs out, and the applications will close right before that last award. And so we definitely want to talk through the application process. If you have applied to a grant with the City of Vancouver previously, you will have a login and password already, and you will use that. And you'll log in, and then you will search for the community and neighborhood grant. If not, if this is your first time applying for a grant with us, you will create a new account. You will go through a few questions with asking for your name and creating information about if you're affiliated with an organization. There will be a question about if you have an EIN, and there is information. If you don't have an EIN, employee identification number, you'll copy and paste the information there. So we have some details there. Once you set up your account, it should take you directly to the community and neighborhood grant application.
Coco, one question we had received from folks ahead of tonight's meeting was, what does the process look like if you don't have an EIN? And one thing I just wanted to quickly share on that front is if your organization doesn't have a taxpayer ID, it's largely going to depend on the type of grant you apply for. So when it comes to the city's accounting, we often have to follow, of course, kind of state procedures and comply with any federal guidelines. So we may ask you to provide some tax information. If the award is going to a person or an individual bank account, that would be your information. But if your organization does not have an EIN right now and they would like to get one, that's something that we're happy to help you with. The process is not too cumbersome, especially if you're of a more informal organization. But if you've heard these terms like a 501c3 or a 501c4, those are the type of kind of official IRS designations that your organization could get in order to have a taxpayer ID number. The process, though, is separate. So we'd be happy to talk that through if you need a little help with that. And Coco, with that, do you want me to go to the portal?
Yes, that would be great.
Awesome.
Yes, and to clarify, you do not need an EIN to be able to apply for this grant. I was just wanting to share that that question will be there, and if it's confusing, there should be some details to help walk you through that.
And the
All
version you
right.
see might look a little different than this, but this is sort of the applicant view.
So once you have your account created and you've clicked on 2024 Community Neighborhood Grants Program, you should be taken to an application somewhat like this, and you'll be asked to fill out this project information. If you want to click on that, so sharing your organization and group name, and then you'll be asked to choose which level of funding you're applying for, project name, an approximate start date, and a rough estimate is okay. We're asking for a project end date to help us with sending the grant reporting reminder to you all because of that 30 days window. And then a project description. And we're asking folks to share where your project will take place, what you're hoping to accomplish, and who you're hoping to work with, and who you're hoping to engage. And then in the next tab, in the next section, you'll share who you're hoping to work with, any community partnerships or any groups that you are working with to put this project together. And then you'll share which focus areas from the strategic plan that your project aligns with and any community benefits that you're hoping that your project will have for the community. And then the final section, we're asking to share your funding request and a detailed description of how you're hoping to use those funds. And you can also, I believe, upload that. Is that right, William? Yeah. If you make a spreadsheet of your budget as well. Yes, there it is. And also there is a section to share if you have any additional funding sources for this project, if you are able to or supplementing it with any other funding.
And Coco, one
And then,
question that, oh, sorry, real quick. If one question had been asked about the other sources of funding, you might have seen other grant programs in the past where that's something that factors into your eligibility or factors into the evaluation process. We're not going to be using that as a criteria to evaluate grants. But the reason we want to know if you have other sources of funding is to better understand how likely it is the project will be successful, how many folks are contributing, and whether or not there's other partner organizations. So for example, if you mention earlier in the application that you're partnering with a school-based organization, like let's say it's a student club at Hudson's Bay High School, we don't expect that group to be donating a lot of money. But you could put here, for example, that they're going to be doing some fundraising or that some of their parents are going to be donating some money. Any estimates for this section are totally okay. Does not need to be exact at this phase. But as your project progresses, we want to have a more kind of certain and exact budget. Thanks, Coco.
thank you, William. And then we have a section to share if you have access to banking, because we are working with other partner institutions and organizations to be able to support receiving the grant if you don't have access to a bank account. So we don't want that to be a barrier in this application process. And this whole application, I'll mention it later as well, but we want it to be very supported. So one of the things that we can do in the Office of Neighborhoods is take a phone call with you and fill out as much as you want to give us about your project ideas, and send you a partially completed application, and then you'll go in and finesse the details before you submit it. So that is an option as well. And as well as if you want to be able to send in any video or audio pieces to your application, we can also accept those through our email. And yes, Jordan, we will have contact information on the very last slide of our presentation. Which is coming back up. So here's a few things that are eligible for grant expenses. You could use grants to cover materials, supplies, rental fees, insurance policies, food and non-alcoholic beverages, and any sort of professional services such as translation and interpretation, contracting with professional artists, and help with advertising and printing.
And one note just to add here, we had heard from, I think some of the folks actually that are on this call, and other community groups as we were doing kind of some of our engagement over the summer, that insurance policies were one of the things that were most badly needed. So we were able to go through a kind of evaluation process with our city attorney's office, look at what other cities throughout the state have been doing, and we're really pleased to be able to include that. So if your organization is looking to have an event and you need an insurance policy, either as a requirement of the facility in order to be able to rent the space, or to make sure that your group is kind of protected from any potential litigation, that's something that funds can be used for. So we're very, very pleased to be able to offer that. Something that we haven't been able to do in the past, but thankfully we got some clarity on.
And as I was mentioning before, we really want to be able to support this process as much as you might need. So we will have, you can make an appointment to meet with us over the phone, over Zoom. We can meet in person, and we can also help support with your application over the phone. You can submit audio and video with your application, and we are working with community partners to be able to support banking for your grant, for the grant recipients.
And if you see that term fiscal sponsor, it's kind of a technical word that's often used kind of in the nonprofit and government space. And what it just refers to is an organization that you would partner with to be the one who receives your funds. So for example, if you're an informal group that doesn't have a bank account, you might be able to partner with a local nonprofit that would receive that money. Some of the nonprofit partners we're talking with have said that they will agree to do that with no charge to the organization, which is wonderful. So they would essentially hold that money for you and distribute it accordingly to your plans. The other thing that a fiscal sponsor might be able to do is help kind of coach your organization. If you, for example, apply for a larger grant and it's more money than you are used to or that you haven't dealt with in the past, and you want to make sure that you're doing a great job kind of with your accounting, making sure you're compliant, those organizations might be able to provide some support as well. And that's another thing we've explored is there have been some folks who've reached out asking about kind of the tax requirements. Do we have to file this for taxes if we have an organization? And that's an area where the city doesn't provide formal guidance. We have kind of a policy of wanting to inform folks, but encouraging you to kind of do your own research and talk to attorneys if you'd like. But one thing the Office of Neighborhoods can do is bring together some of those partners, bring together some local experts, is really help you through that process. So if you're concerned that that might be a barrier, please reach out to us and we're happy to meet with you or to hold a kind of a larger meeting about that. There's also a question just in the chat, Renita, but is this a reimbursement grant? Great question. No, it is not. So we think about some other traditional programs that focus solely on reimbursement. What that would mean is, let's say you're awarded $8,000 and we only give you the $8,000 after you've spent it. We've heard that that's a huge barrier for local organizations, and it actually might prevent many of them from being able to participate. And so what we will do is we will give you the money that you've asked for and requested, that you have documented, and we'll work with you to make sure that that amount is spent. If for some reason you have unspent funds or you don't spend your grant money at all, that's another thing we would work with you on a one-on-one basis to deal with. There is not a requirement, for example, that you spend every single penny. We would never want you to overspend or to waste funds, but we want you to be good stewards of that public money. Jordan also had a question in the chat about if we wanted to hire a concrete company for work, could we? The unsatisfying answer, Jordan, that I'll give you and most people tonight is it would probably depend on your project. If the concrete work was directly essential to the effort that you're engaging in, then it would fall under the professional services category, just kind of like anything else. But it would depend. So for example, if it was putting a new driveway in at a private residence, that probably wouldn't satisfy the criteria for a community benefit. But if it was repaving a community space or an area that's used for community events, I can imagine that that might be something someone would apply for. So I would love to learn more about your project. I see one more question just came through from Tina, but Coco, is it okay with you if we go to the next slide real quick?
Yes, definitely. The next slide is questions. So I
So
can read Tina's question. I'm the communications director for Dog Paw Off Leash Parks nonprofit, 100% volunteer run. Ooh, went missing. That's for going down. We manage 4 off-leash parks in Clark County, 2 in Vancouver in the city. Can we use funds for a new riding lawnmower to mow IKE dog park by BPA and fence replacement at IKE?
I would say if those are expenses that would be incurred directly to help support an ongoing project or program, then it would meet the eligibility criteria. Of course, at that same time, Tina, if you'd like to talk more about sort of how you might phrase that or explain some of the work that you do, we'd be happy to help with that. But that's the kind of expense we imagine is directly central to an ongoing project. And so you would just want to make that clear in your application.
There was another question. Is there a match of money or volunteer time?
There's no volunteer match required. That's another thing, or contribution required. That's another thing that came up, and we were thinking a lot about how to make this as accessible and equitable as possible. And that's something that other cities in the state require, but we're really trying hard not to. So there's no requirement that you pitch in a certain dollar amount or that you provide matching funds.
If we apply for a dollar amount of, say, the whole 10K max, but would gladly accept anything less in hope of being approved, how might we communicate that?
Oh, great question. I think that's from Tara. Is that right?
Mhm.
So Tara, there's a portion of your application in both in the funding section and then in the sort of the last field that's available, which mentions additional information. If you have other information that you would want to share about kind of the level of ambition that the project has, like for example, we say if we got $10,000, we would spend it on this. If we got $5,000, we would spend it on that. We absolutely welcome that because that helps the review team with their decisions. But that would be the most appropriate place to enter that would be in the supplemental or additional information section.
Gary asks, if we have multiple events in a year, can we apply for multiple grants? We've also
Oh, great,
received
great
yeah.
question, Gary. And I'm laughing because this is a question that Coco and I were just talking about because a few folks have asked about it. And I think in the interest of clarifying and making it as easy on everyone as possible, if you have multiple grants or multiple events that are being run by the same organization and they're part of an ongoing series or they're related, we would ask that you apply for one larger grant to cover both of them. If your organization can do that with a micro grant, we absolutely, of course, support that as well. But it's easier to approve one grant application for a series of events than multiple smaller applications. With that said, we also got that question of, can my organization apply for a micro grant and a larger grant? The answer is yes. We want to make sure that the access to the grant program is as equitable as possible. So if you've already received a grant or you've applied for multiple grants, that's something that can factor in the evaluation process. We would encourage you, though, to just be mindful of what you're applying for. If you're part of an organization that is going to be doing an art in the park event or hosting a barbecue or a picnic, we understand that that might be relatively small compared to a more ambitious program. And we don't want to dissuade you from being ambitious. So if you have a larger project and a smaller event, that's absolutely okay. Any additional questions that we can answer?
Jamie asks, our neighborhood association has an idea for a community mural project, but it would require a lot of volunteer support and coordination. Could we work with the City of Vancouver volunteer program staff to help us figure out volunteer considerations? Thinking the neighborhood association could submit for materials, equipment for a mural project, but we have a hard time getting people out to volunteer.
Well, seeing as Coco is on our team, the official mural expert, I'll ask Coco for your suggestions, and I might have a couple at the end. But do you have a suggestion for how they might either collaborate with the city or other groups?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on with your idea already with collaborating with the volunteer program. I think it's something that we could also list in our the newsletter that we send out to neighborhood leaders. And we could share it with other neighborhoods to try to get folks interested. Um, but yeah, I'd be happy, yeah, to work with you in terms of, I think part of the grant could be used for advertising as well.
That's a wonderful suggestion. And the other thing that reminds me of as well is we got a question about if there's a partner that I'm hoping to work with, but I don't have them officially on board yet, how do I indicate that? And as you go through the application, you can mention that in the section when it comes to community partnerships. We've reached out to the following 4 groups. We're hoping to work with them. Your application is stronger if you've secured their partnership. Right? So if you can say that we are already going to be partnering with these 2 groups, that's better than saying we've only reached out or we're hoping to advertise. With that said, we recognize that that's not always possible. And the groups that you might reach out to, they are going to vary greatly based on the project. So a couple suggestions though, just if you're looking for volunteers, organizations like the Scouts or service organizations, student clubs, working with your local elementary school, middle school, or high school would be great ways. And then there may be even businesses or other organizations that you might consider partnering with who might be interested in doing things like having their staff volunteer or doing a day of service. So lots of different options that way. That's a great question. Oh, and Eric, thank you for the suggestion there to check out the Mural Society.
Tara,
So
that's a good question. Who at the city determines and approves the grant requests? We will have an internal review team. And then we are also, one of the things we wanted to mention, if you all know of folks in the community who might not be applying for the grant, but might be interested in being a part of the review team, please send them our way. We would love to have community input.
yeah, thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Arlene's asking about access to the chat. Yeah, so part of what we'll do after this meeting is we'll share a copy of the recording. We'll also email a copy of the chat to everyone who's on this call tonight. And then we'll be posting the recording on the city's website. So if you go to cityofvancouver.us/community grant, community grants, don't forget the S, it'll be posted there tomorrow, hopefully by the afternoon.
One of the questions that just came in is, it seems that earlier applications have the best chance of getting grant money. Is that correct? So because of the rolling application, the grant funding will, yes. William, do you want to take that one?
Sure. And I think there's 2 answers to that. One we would
Yeah.
say is we would encourage you to get your applications in as early as possible. We know given the current weather, you and your neighborhood or you and your group might not be thinking about what you want to do in July, but it's the perfect time to kind of fantasize about once it's warm again, once we have the weather that's in this photo, what are we going to do together? So if you're already planning something like a neighborhood gathering, a national night out event, a community garden, a volunteer event, those are all things that can happen later in the year. So if you want to apply now for a project that won't happen until September or October or November even, that's totally fine. We absolutely welcome and encourage that. With that said, we've created those 2 different tiers. So a tier 1 micro grant of $500 or less, and then a tier 2 grant of up to $10,000, exactly for that reason. So if funding for that larger category runs out, we'll still hopefully have lots of those micro grants available. And those are separate pots. So we won't be pulling from one or the other. We want to try to make sure that there's a lot of money available. I think we have money set aside for 40 micro grants to really encourage as many smaller projects as possible. Oh, and Haley, thank you for jumping in since you're here.
Hi, Haley. Haley mentioned that that if you are looking for program support with the citywide volunteer program, that you will want to get your ask in sooner than later, because capacity is very slim.
And as we said, even if the city's volunteer program can't provide support, there may be lots of other organizations that you can reach out to, and we'd be happy to help with that. Oh, thank you, Eric, and thank you for joining us. What we'll do is we'll continue to take questions, but just in the interest of time, we'll go to the next slide, which will share our contact information. We can also paste that in the chat. I'm sorry, Coco, did you want to take this slide?
Oh, thank you all so much for being here tonight. We're really looking forward to working with you all throughout this process and seeing what great projects and applications you are ready to submit.
You'll see that there's the city's neighborhoods email. That's the best email address to reach us. Email is shared with Coco, with myself, and with two other members of our team. That way, if one of us is out of the office or we can't respond in a timely manner, other folks are able to jump in. We would strongly encourage you to reach out at any time in the coming weeks. We're happy to help. We're looking forward to assisting folks as much as we can. And really, if your organization has a creative idea, but you're not sure how to go about it, we are here to help exactly with that. And with that, I'll put this link again in the chat, but all the application materials, the link to apply, they're available at cityofvancouver.us/community grants. And with that, what we'll do is we'll stay on for a few more minutes if anyone has individual questions, but we'll go ahead and stop the recording right now. Thank you all so much.